Hi, I'm Daniel Cabal, guest teaching today on Devotionables, brief devotions for busy people. We're looking in Mark chapter 4 today. Jesus, in the book of Mark, it says he's been preaching, but we haven't actually got to hear an actual sermon from Jesus yet. The crowds are following Jesus because he's healing them and casting out demons. But we haven't actually got to hear what Jesus came to do, which is preach. And when Jesus does begin to preach in Mark chapter 4, it's pretty unusual. Jesus begins telling the story of a guy who's farming. The farmer throws seed out everywhere, which is the way they did it back then. They would often throw the seed out and then till that ground instead of the way we do it, where, we plow it all first and then throw the seed. Well, anyway, Jesus tells the story of a guy who's throwing seed out everywhere. He's throwing it everywhere. Good land, bad land, rocky land. And that's the end of the story. That's not the end of our devotionable, because Jesus' disciples are puzzled. And they come to him later and say, what did you mean when you told that story about the guy who's planting seed and some of it doesn't grow because it was on bad land and some grows a lot, big crop on the good land? What's that about? Jesus tells them something shocking. He says, to you is given the mystery of the kingdom. The disciples don't understand the mystery, and I guess that's part of why it's a mystery. But just because they don't understand it doesn't mean they weren't given it. In movies and stuff, when somebody gets a secret message or something extremely important that's going to be important to them later, even though they don't understand what it is now, that's kind of the way that this is. Jesus has given them the mystery of the kingdom, and Jesus gives them an explanation of the parable. He's teaching that people are like that ground. What kind of ground are you, is what Jesus is implying. Are you the kind of ground that when plant seed gets put onto it, you spring up, you're like, oh, fantastic, but you got no roots, so as soon as the going gets tough, you get going. You're out. Or are you the kind of ground that you're like, oh, this is wonderful, this is really wonderful, but in verse 15, it says, when you hear, Satan comes and takes away the word which has been sown in them. What kind of person are you? Are you the kind of person who's going to bear fruit or not? After that, Jesus says, after he explains that parable to the disciples in private, he says something really interesting. He says, take care what you listen to. Take care what you listen to. Now, Jesus is meaning, are you listening to my words? Are you listening to nonsense? But I think it also does apply to our music, our movies, because sometimes what we take in comes out. Not always, but sometimes what you listen to, if you believe it, it can mess you up. Jesus goes on to say, though, making his meaning explicitly clear in verse 24, by your standard of measure it will be measured to you, and more will be given to you besides. For whoever has, to him more shall be given. And whoever doesn't have, even what he has shall be taken away. Doesn't seem fair. That's the way life is. Even on the stock market, they say it takes money to make money. Now, once you've got a lot of money, it's frankly easier to make a lot more money. And in real life, when you have very little and it's taken away from you, you're not going to have much left. Spiritual life is like that too. If you want more, go get more from Jesus. I'm going to leave you with a little parable. It sounds similar because it's still about farming. It says in verse 26, the kingdom of God's like a man who casts seed upon the soil. He goes to bed at night, gets up in the day, and the seed sprouts and grows. How? He himself doesn't know. The soil produces crops by itself, first the blade, then the head, then the mature grain in the head. But when the crop permits, he immediately puts in the sickle because he knows the time is ripe. The harvest has come. I'm not going to explain that one for you. You're going to have to think about Well, no, I'm not the ground in this parable, so what am I? Thank you for joining us in today's devotionable. God bless you and have a great rest of the day and a solid week as well.